Hey everyone, it's Davin, and this is the final episode of the Free Your Voice, Free Your Life podcast. Not forever, just for 2024. And I can't really believe it. How are we already at the end of 2024? A year that for me has been quite an epic adventure, full of unexpected joys and challenges, and wow. But I'm also sitting right now in excited anticipation for what 2025 might have in store. I'm recording this episode for you. By the way, this is the 53rd episode of this podcast, which is also crazy to me. But I'm recording it for you specifically on December 28th, which is just right in the middle of this time where, I don't know whether you celebrate uh, Christmas or how you feel about New Year's, but there's this week in between those two holidays. And it's my observation that there's something that happens in this week where we are collectively holding this reflective energy about the previous year. Some of us lamenting the challenges, the trials, the tribulations. Some of us thinking in deep gratitude or appreciation for what has transpired. Some of us doing both, but also in this anticipatory state around what the new year might have, what changes we'd like to make in our lives. And I think that this week for me is quite a special week. I've learned that it's an opportunity to go inward, to really reflect, to contemplate, but also to dream. So I wanted to record this podcast for you during this week to bring that energy that I'm carrying personally and that which I'm engaging, and hopefully it'll benefit all of us as we go into the new year, because I think there are some ideas that I might have to offer here that would give you permission to move forward with a little bit more ease. And I also want you to know that this conversation is inspired by a conversation I've had with many clients over the years, but with one in particular that I had lately that really has rung true in my mind. And I think that it might help inform how it is that you approach your new year. See, someone came to me recently, not really for singing. They were interested in exploring a more expansive, open version of their voice. And they're specifically interested in doing work around keynote speaking. Something about standing up in front of groups, sharing their story, and wanting to do it in a way moving forward that felt more honest, felt more transparent, felt more vulnerable, and felt more aligned with who they know themselves to be. See, this person has been through a lot, um, illness, personal turmoil, relationship stuff. But the spaces in which this person is going to be speaking most would be professional environments. And so at the beginning of our conversation, this person had told me this and that they had done some healing work. And the theme that kept coming up for them was voice, voice, voice. This happens a lot where I meet people and there's just something that calls out to them in a certain season where they know they're supposed to pursue their voice. Anyway, so as this person was telling me all this, as I was listening, I was hearing them say essentially that they needed to come up with the idea, come up with the reason, come up with the story, come up with the narrative for what it is that they'd be using their voice for. Come up with something new. And what I kept thinking as they were also telling me about their life is it's all here. You don't have to come up with anything new. In particular, you don't have to start over. You don't have to start over. I see this all the time. And I've experienced this myself where we have a vision for ourselves that looks different in the future. We have a 2025 checklist, goals, etc. But we believe that in order to do those things, we have to start over in some way. We have to wipe the slate clean. We have to completely change our diet. We have to completely change our schedule. We have to eliminate certain relationships, etc., etc., etc. Sound familiar? I've been there many times. But what I've learned in my own personal journey toward growth, toward healing, and what I've witnessed and helped support so many others in is that that mindset is actually detrimental to the change that you want. The feeling that you have to start fresh, start new, start over is actually very inhibitive to starting at all. I've said this to you before, but I see it all the time that when I work with people, usually where they want to be, where they want to end up, is much closer than what they realize. Now, there's this great irony in this, in that when they're on the journey, they'll often feel, I shouldn't say often, almost always feel that the journey is going quite slowly. Almost never does someone reflect to me, I can't believe how fast I'm doing this. Almost always do people say, I can't believe this is taking so long. But there's this irony as an outsider. When you're watching someone grow, when you're watching them change, you never feel like that. I never, ever feel like, boy, I wish this could go a lot faster. The only reason I would feel that way is to try to satisfy the person's impatience. But whenever someone makes a really big change or a shift, it always feels quick. It always feels like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. It always feels surprising. It always feels astonishing. It always feels delightful. But one of the things that slows people down the most is when they feel like they have to do XYZ before they can get to PDQ. When they feel like, in order to do this, I need to do this. In order to do this, I will have to have accomplished this. Now, look, I'm not delusional about what skill building entails. And I don't mean to say that there aren't certain prerequisites for different types of growth and change. I'm not negating any of that. But I want you to know that the next right step is always the step that is closest to you. The next right thing to do is always the thing that is the easiest next thing to do. Now, I know you don't believe me. I know when you hear me say that, you're like, that's not possible. Because the change I want is going to be hard. The change I want is going to be difficult. It's going to mean overcoming a lot. Yeah, maybe. But that doesn't mean that your path to that change feels or should feel difficult the whole time. Actually, I would even argue that real change, real lasting change, it never feels laborious while you're doing it. It never feels effortful or squeezed or tight. It always feels like the next right thing to do. It always feels inevitable in a way. Whenever I experience being with someone who has created significant shifts or changes in their lives, and I reflect back to them, look what you've overcome. Look what you've done. Look at how you've shifted. They're typically not very impressed with themselves. And I've grown to understand that that's just because when you're wanting to make these sort of shifts or changes, the feeling is in the moment that I have to do this. It's actually the only next thing that I can do. Even if it feels totally irrational or illogical, you had to do it. But the thing that you had to do rarely feels like an insurmountable task in the moment. It just feels like the next step. It feels like the next right move. It feels like the thing that was closest to you next. I know that this is a hard concept to wrap our minds around of because we really want for change, we really want for growth to require a laborious effort. There's something about that that would feel satisfying to our intellectual minds. I'll give you an example as it relates to singing and specifically the breath. Whenever you ask someone to take a deep breath, a Joe Schmo on the street who doesn't know sort of the ins and outs of the way that breath functions in the body, if you ask them to take a deep breath, typically what they'll do is they'll take a breath that sounds like this. They'll tighten their belly, they'll raise their shoulders, they'll stiffen their neck. And when they do that, there's an effort in that. The effort in the moment feels satisfying. It feels like the cue that you've taken a deep breath. But for those of us who've done some work around understanding the way that breath functions in the body, a breath that's truly deep, it actually doesn't feel like much when it's coordinated well. It certainly doesn't feel like additional stress. It doesn't feel like additional tension. And that's confusing to the mind. When I introduce this kind of breathing to a singer, a breathing that's coordinated well in their body and it feels typically easy or simple, they'll often say to me, "Well, I don't feel like I'm doing anything." And that's the point. That's really, really the point because when a breath, the essence of your life, the vitality of your body, when it's coordinated well, it doesn't feel like much of anything. And that's where the satisfaction comes from. But you've likely grown up with a narrative, because we all have, that hard work is required for you to really accomplish anything. That you might need to sweat a lot, you might need to cry a lot, there might need to be some blood along the way. And the thing is that that's true, but it doesn't actually feel like that when you've chosen a path that feels aligned. There's something greater within you that will know better than to struggle and to effort. And so when the voice pops in the new year that says, we got to wipe this slate clean, we got to start afresh, start anew, start over, finally pursue the thing, I would just argue that that's not your inner voice. That's the culture's voice. Your inner voice will always encourage you to take the next steps that feel simple. This is best accomplished by starting in reflection of gratitude around your previous year, specifically as it relates to the new year, but you could think about it in general with your life. To make a list of things that you are in deep appreciation and gratitude for. Look at your life and ask yourself, what are the elements of my life that feel really in alignment? They feel like they're going well, that feel life giving, that feel like they don't suck or drain energy from me. Now, you might not find many, and that's okay, even if you just have the one thing or a couple things. Let me just offer that those are your clues around what to do next. Those are your clues around what to do next. Now, you might need to make a second list of the things that are draining you, and that's fair. But I would just encourage you actually not to spend too much effort, too much energy, too much time focusing on those things. Because if you do, you're inevitably going to look at them and think about how you have to wipe the slate clean. And remember, whenever you have to do that, that's not necessarily the most aligned path for moving forward toward the change that you desire. So, what is it in your life that lights you up? What is it that gives you pleasure? This is a word I've really been leaning into in 2025 because I think it's just something I wasn't taught. In fact, I think that my experience growing up was to be skeptical of pleasure. I think that was sort of the implied message that I was given, that pleasure wasn't something that was appropriate to lean into. But I've learned in this last year in particular, the things that have felt most pleasureful are the things that, when I allowed myself to enjoy, inevitably grew. They expanded. And they always felt the most like me. They always felt the most like the direction that I wanted to head. So, where is pleasure in your life? Where is surprise? Where is delight? What do you do regularly that you think to yourself, yeah, this feels really fun. This feels really goofy. This feels surprising. This feels exciting. If you focus your attention and your energy on those things and simply ask yourself, is there more for me in this? The next step will emerge. Now, the other thing about the stuff that you don't, that doesn't light you up, that feels difficult, I want you to know that the next steps for what to do there are available to you quite easily as well. But you won't be able to see them as clearly as you need if you haven't spent the appropriate time practicing leaning into expansive, pleasureful delight, joy. Because when you experience that sort of thing in your life, more of it, the stuff that I told you not to spend that much attention on, it becomes very prominent in your purview. You see it in stark contrast to the places in your life that feel lit up and alive and joyful and gleeful and delightful and shocking and awe filled. You see all the bullshit in relationship to that, and it just somehow manages to inevitably fall away. Relationships fall away, jobs end, stuff that takes up your time that you simply don't want to be doing. You finally get the courage to say, yeah, I'm good. None of that for me. So if you have the courage to lean into that which feels good, that which you're grateful for, that which you appreciate, and that which brings you pleasure, there's this contrast that emerges, and it tells you so clearly around what steps you need to take to enliven the change within your body. And those steps, like I said, they don't feel effortful, they feel necessary. So, like I said, they might involve blood, sweat, and tears, but you'll feel like you had to take them. You didn't have any other choice. But I'm telling you, this is best accomplished when you cultivate a practice of abundance in your life, when you cultivate the ability to look at your life through the lens of what you have, not as a way of bypassing that which frustrates you or is uncomfortable, but rather as a way of framing your perspective differently. Now, I want to offer as a caveat that this is complicated when you're in the midst of working to heal trauma. And I don't want to offer any of this as sort of a replacement or a bypass around doing the good work through therapy, psychotherapy, psychiatry, somatic experiencing, however it is that you might be approaching some of the wounds from your past. I recognize that someone even saying some of the things I'm saying might feel triggering if that's at the top of your mind and the top of your experience right now. And I'll just say, save this podcast for next year. But if you've done some work on those things, if you've really gotten to the heart of some of the wounds from the earlier years of your life, or even from the recent years of your life that have seemed to weigh you down, there's an opportunity in 2025 to move forward with less effort, to move forward with less ease. Now, there's something else I want to tell you about my own experience in this regard. I'm the king of starting over. So when I say to you, you don't have to start over, it's because I've started over a lot. I'm actually pretty good at ending seasons of my life, ending chapters. I don't tend to let things linger on into a place of resentment, which can happen. But one of the things I've noticed is that whenever I start over and I build something from the ground up, even if it feels really inspired and really exciting, where I land is really close to where I was. The thing I create, which in the moment will feel like a totally new inspiration, if I hold it in close proximity to the things that I was creating before that, before I started over, before I burnt the whole thing down, it's the logical next trajectory of my creative growth. It's always funny when I look back at the music that I've made or the creative arts that I've participated in. It's so easy to see the ways in which they have predated each other. How what I was creating, even in college was a predecessor to what it is that I make and create and share with the world now. And so as I see that, I recognize that some of the dramatic behavior I've exhibited, again, toward wanting to burn the whole thing down or exit completely, or I just need to get away and start over, it wasn't actually necessary. What I needed to do was take inventory, mindful inventory of where I was. and really accept that I can't control the outcome. But what I can do is be open to the multiplicity of outcomes. That I can start right here, right where I am, exercise gratitude and appreciation, see what I have, and then step into the next thing, which will inevitably lead me to the next thing that I'm supposed to do, the next thing that I'm supposed to make, the next thing that I'm supposed to create, the next relationship that I'm supposed to engage, the next. Whenever I've burned it down and built it anew, I've ended up much closer to where I began than what I imagined for myself. So I offer that to you as a cautionary tale, another reason that you don't have to start over. You don't have to start over. You can start exactly where you are. Now, I recognize that some of this might feel like generally just an idea and hard to figure out exactly what it might mean to enact this in your life. But again, I'll just lead you back to the exercise that most of us are doing this time of year anyway. And it starts with reflection. What was the last year like? And then I'd particularly guide your attention to a gratitude practice around that. Appreciation. What felt like it lit you up? What felt like it was exciting? What felt like it was thrilling? What felt like it was scary? What felt like it gave you more life? And then from there, look at that thing, that object, that experience, and ask yourself, what's next to it? What's the closest thing next to it in my life that I could do? For some of you, that might mean singing. For some of you, that might mean other forms of creativity. And I want you to know that a classic experience that I have with people in singing, I've said this to you before, is that they feel like the next step is to get on a big stage. And I want you to know that your car and your shower and your local open mic or your family gathering or your church, these are all the logical next step. You might not have to audition for The Voice. You might not have to, I don't know, star on Broadway for it to be the next step. You might need to carve out the smallest little spaces and places and environments in your life to start to do more of the thing that lights you up because there's a momentum that comes with that, a natural, inevitable momentum. If you sang every day on the way to work, if you committed for that commute that you were going to do exercises and warm ups, or you're going to put on your favorite song or whatever, but you did it every day, I'm curious what that might invite more of into your life. I'm curious. And I pretty much guarantee it wouldn't feel like a big deal. It would feel pretty easy and pretty joy giving. But if you felt like you had to start a rigorous practice routine in 2025, you would probably be overwhelmed. You would probably feel like you didn't know what to do. You would probably feel frustrated. You'd probably feel disappointed a week into it when you didn't accomplish everything that you wanted to do. And this is what I mean by muscling or efforting or squeezing your way into the change that you hope to create. Another important part about this is just really being graceful with yourself about where you are. Because I know it's easy to reflect on our current situation and just wish that we were somewhere else. But that wishing is really at the source of your suffering. When you can look at where you are and when you can exercise an attitude of grace and go, look where you are, look where you've come, especially considering everything that you've been through, everything that you've overcome this year, all the frustration, all the challenges, all the heartache, all the sorrow, all the suffering, all the life events, but you're here. And if you're here, there are so many other places that you could be. And there's so many other worse places that many other folks end up, but look where you are. This is the sort of gracious attitude that when you offer to yourself, it has the capacity to build momentum quickly, really quickly. And then you start a language, you start a type of conversation in your head that goes, you're doing great. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Growth is inevitable. Change is yours because change is all of ours. You can move the needle just this little bit and it matters. When you start to have that conversation with yourself, there's an inevitable momentum. There's an inevitable attraction that happens. And it doesn't require starting the whole thing over. It requires you being exactly where you are. I'm always amazed at people's resistance toward this kind of thinking. I get it because I experience it too or have experienced it at times, but people want desperately for this type of conversation to involve some sort of significant undertaking. They want to suffer. We want to suffer. But like I said earlier, it's just because we have this belief that suffering is the only path toward meaningful change. And I want to iterate and reiterate that that's not true. It's a false narrative. And it's not to say that change doesn't involve the ending of certain situations and the grief around letting go and the fear around stepping into the unknown. But what I want you to know is all of those things don't feel insurmountable. All of those things don't feel like too much when you followed the path of least resistance. Yeah, the path of least resistance. Now, I know too, you've heard that the path of least resistance is the lazy path. And that's not true either. It's not true. The path of least resistance is the path you follow when you follow what feels good. The resistant path is when you resist where you are and you feel like you have to fight your way out of it. When you accept where you are, even if it's in a job that you hate or a relationship that's frustrating or with a lack of experience in a certain realm, wherever it is that you are, when you look at it with gratitude for where you've come from, with a deep acceptance and knowing of where you are, and a gracious attitude around that too, look where you've come from. From there, the next step, the next loving, growing, gracious step will present itself, and it won't feel like labor. It'll feel inevitable. It'll feel like it embraces your inner knowing and the path that follows. It feels like it moves you toward the change that you've been craving. And once you step into that sort of change, you just keep looking for more. You keep looking for more. You keep looking for more. You keep looking for more. My word for 2024 was momentum, and boy, did I experience it. And what's funny is I didn't experience it in the way that I imagined at all. I imagined it actually to be quite a lot bigger. I imagined it to be, um, I don't know, more significant in ways that I recognize were sort of superficial. But what I got was a feeling of growth and expansion like I never have before. And even further, a reflection from the people that love me that I seem like I'm on the right path, that I feel like that I seem like I'm pursuing and in the flow of that which is aligned for me, that which is divinely timed for me. And you know what I've heard more than any other year prior in my life is that people are inspired by what it is that I'm doing. And that really means the most to me. When I hear from someone that they are watching the path I'm pursuing and they just find it invigorating for their own path, I don't know, that moves me on a very deep level because it sort of speaks to some beliefs I have around when we pursue our own well being. When we pursue our own goodness, there's this ripple effect. There's this outpouring. There's this permeation that happens with the people that love you and are closest to you. And then that echoes outward from them as well. It goes against some narratives around selfishness and steps into the selflessness of being mindful of oneself. the opening, the expanding, the transparency that happens when we really take time to stop and to pause and to look at our lives and to decide with clarity, what is the life that I want to live? How do I want to spend my days? How do I want to experience my body? What kind of relationships am I excited to be in? What is the vision that really guides my actions? What is the thing that I would do no matter what? Did you ever hear that phrase when people ask, what's the thing that you would do even if you didn't get paid to do it? What's the thing that you would do even if you got paid a lot of money to do it? I'll tell you, that's actually a more interesting question. What's the thing that you would keep doing even if a lot of money was involved? Because that's where things get complicated. I digress. That's a bit of a side note. But it's really important as you think about what is the life that you want to live. As you approach the new year, what do you want this year to be like? And what would it mean if you could give yourself permission to not have to start over, to be exactly where you are? Do you believe that the amount of change is possible if you don't start over? Because that belief is really important. Your commitment and willingness to trust that the universe supplies, that the universe provides, that there's enough for you, even if you're not sweating your ass off, even if you're not bleeding, even if you're not cutting everyone else off at the knees. Do you believe that you can get to the place that you desire while feeling good? While feeling open, while feeling expansive, while feeling free, while feeling inclusive, while feeling the ripple effects of your own goodness. My friend, may this be a note of encouragement to you. May you go into this new year with a profound understanding of the challenges and the successes of your previous year, but may you see it all in terms of abundance. That the contrast of the previous year has helped you hone and understand better than ever what it is that you want. And may you know in that what it is that you want, there is a step right next door to it that you can take that will give you more of that. And when you do, there's a momentum that builds because the universe is abundant and it's set up in your favor. And may you know that when you use your voice and it feels free and it feels easy and it feels open, and when you breathe and it doesn't feel tight or constricted, that you're doing enough. You're doing more than enough. In fact, you're not even doing, you're just being. And that's the only real way forward without resistance. The suffering, you can let it go. You don't have to cling. This doesn't have to be hard. This doesn't have to be difficult. You don't have to create difficulty for yourself. And the courage to step into situations that you might perceive as difficult, you have it within you. You know what's next. When I say the next right step is there, it might mean that you quit your job. It might mean that you change careers. It might mean that that relationship comes to an end. It might mean that you finally get up on stage and sing in front of people. It might mean that a new relationship begins because you had the courage to strike up a conversation. It might mean that you finally go to the places that you've been longing to go. It might mean that you finally let yourself dance. It might mean that you finally go on that meditation retreat that you've been thinking about forever. It might mean that you reassemble your whole week. But again, it's not because you had to start over to do it. It's because it's the next thing you knew you had to do. And the thing that you knew you had to do, it always feels right and it always feels good. It might also feel complicated, but it feels good. So I offer this to you. I offer this to myself. I hope that we can together step into this new year, into new adventures, new possibilities. I've got some stuff in the works that I'm excited about. And as always, I'm so grateful to be able to share in my journey with you. I wanted to let you know you can stay connected with me on Instagram at Davin Youngs. You can learn more about me at davinyoungs.com. The Reset My Immersive Sound Healing Experience is going to be in both Omaha and Boston in January, also with some new dates being announced soon in March in Philadelphia and Kentucky, Louisville. I'm going to be bringing Voxus, my interactive improvisational singing corporate experience, to Tucson, Arizona in February. That's a HR conference, so that won't be open to the public. And then each month, if you're in or around Chicago, I host Chicago Circle Singing, where we do some really incredible improvisational singing and music making. Every week, I host a virtual meditation group called Sit Club. You can learn more about that at davinyoungs.com. Love to have you be a part of that. And yeah, more podcast episodes to come in the new year. All right, my friends, blessing on your 2025. I appreciate you. I love you. Until next year. Peace.